0-day brief.
Imagine you hire, like, a world-class bodyguard to protect your corporate headquarters. And you give this bodyguard the master keys to every single room in the building.
Right, like unrestricted access.
Exactly. We are talking unrestricted access, the absolute highest clearance available. They stand at the front door with a reassuring smile, checking everyone who comes in, inspecting every package, monitoring every hallway. You feel completely safe. But now, imagine someone doesn't try to, fight the bodyguard. Instead, they just figure out how to put on a replica of that bodyguard's uniform.
Yeah, so the intruders don't even need to pick any locks.
No locks at all.
They don't need to sneak past the perimeter alarms or find a back door. They bypass the entire security apparatus by literally becoming the security apparatus.
They just become the bodyguard. Welcome to this deep dive. Today, our mission is to unpack a really terrifying collapse in our modern trust architecture. We're looking at a recent, highly urgent security briefing detailing two massive zero-day vulnerabilities in a Microsoft Defender. And the goal for you today is to understand how the ultimate protector, the software guarding over 1 billion Windows machines worldwide, has quietly become the ultimate attack surface.
Okay, let's unpack this. The core tension we are dealing with here is that Defender runs with maximum system privileges on a Windows machine.
And we should probably clarify what system privilege actually means in a Windows environment, because it is so easy to confuse it with just being an administrator.
Oh, totally. I mean, administrator sounds like the top level, right?
Well, right, but it's not. When you are an administrator, you have a lot of power, but the operating system still puts up guardrails. It still occasionally asks, like, are you sure you want to do this?
You get those little pop-up warnings. Exactly. System privilege is different. It is the absolute unquestioned authority. It's a computer essentially talking to itself. When a process runs a system, there are 0 guardrails. It can read any file, modify any process, and rewrite the fundamental rules of the operating system.
And Defender has to run with that level of power, right? I mean, to do its job, it needs to be able to see and touch every file, every running application, every network connection. It has to be the most powerful entity on the machine to stop malicious entities.
Well, yeah. But the terrifying flip side is that when an attacker compromises that specific piece of software, they inherit that exact level of absolute unquestioned trust. It is the ultimate paradox of endpoint security. By handing that level of authority to a single piece of software, it stops being merely a protective shield.
It becomes a target.
It suddenly becomes the most valuable high-leverage target on the entire board. And to understand how this trust model is breaking down fundamentally, we have to look at the exact mechanics of the two 0 days actively exploiting systems right now.
Right. Let's get into the nuts and bolts of the 1-2 punch of this attack. The first vulnerability is cataloged as CVE-2026-41091. The briefing classifies this as a CVSS 7.8 elevation of privilege bug. It lives inside Defender's scanning engine, and it revolves around something called link following.
Which is super interesting.
Yeah, for those who aren't in the weeds of file systems, think of a junction link like a trapdoor or like a fake redirect sign. You open a folder thinking you're walking into a broom closet, but the junction link seamlessly teleports you into the bank vault.
Right. And the vulnerability exists because Defender doesn't properly validate the final destination of that trapdoor before it decides to operate on it. When the scanning engine encounters one of these junction links created by an attacker, it just follows it blindly.
And it brings all of its system-level authority along for the ride.
Exactly. It walks right through the trapdoor with the master keys.
Wait, let me push back on this for a second. The security brief specifically labels this as a local vulnerability, meaning the attacker is already in, right? They've gotten in through a phishing email, or maybe the user downloaded a bad PDF.
Correct.
So if they already have local access to your machine, how bad can this actually be? The house is already breached. Why are we treating this like a catastrophic failure?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the local designation is exactly what makes people underestimate the severity of the flaw. You really have to look at the anatomy of modern ransomware to see why this is so devastating.
Because they need more access.
Yeah, nearly every major attack starts locally. An employee clicks a phishing link, or a malicious macro runs in a spreadsheet. At that moment, the attacker is on the machine, but they are just running as a regular user. They are trapped in a really low privilege box.
So they can only see what the user sees.
Yeah.
They can't, encrypt the core hard drive, they can't disable the security systems, and they can't spread to the central servers.
Exactly. They are effectively stuck in the lobby. To do the real damage, to deploy the ransomware, to dump the network passwords, to pivot to the domain controller, They need one critical mechanism.
Privilege escalation.
Yes, they need a way to transform from a local user into system. That single step is the fulcrum of the entire ransomware industry. So the attacker creates a malicious junction link that points to a highly restricted Windows system file.
Okay.
Then they place a harmless-looking file nearby. When Defender goes to do its routine scan of that harmless file, the junction link redirects Defender's action. Defender, acting as system, inadvertently modifies the restricted file with the attacker's payload.
Wow. The attacker literally just tricked the bodyguard into unlocking the vault for them.
Tricked the guard, got the keys.
That is just
Yeah.
the tragic irony is the Defender, the very software designed to stop them from escalating privileges, is the exact mechanism handing them the keys to the kingdom. But wait, if they trick Defender into running their payload as system, Defender is still active, right?
Yes, it is.
So wouldn't its cloud telemetry instantly flag that a critical system file was just hijacked?
You would think so. And that is exactly why the attackers don't stop at privilege escalation. They need a distraction, basically a way to blind the cameras. And that brings up the second vulnerability in this chain, which is CVE-2026-41091.
Right.
This is classified as a denial of service vulnerability in the anti-malware platform.
The brief calls this the smoke bomb. And I think it's important to clarify, a denial of service here isn't just making the computer crash and show a blue screen. I mean, that would alert the IT department immediately.
Totally. A denial of service in a security platform is a highly tactical surgical maneuver. The attacker uses the first bug to gain system privileges. Then they use the second bug to intentionally crash the specific components of Defender that sound the alarms.
So they shut down the cameras?
They drop real-time protection, they sever the cloud telemetry heartbeat, and they disable tamper protection. The software might still look like it's running, but it's completely deaf and blind.
That is wild. You use the guard's radio to call in a false alarm across town, and while they are distracted, you deploy your actual malicious payload. And we need to stress the urgency of this sequence for you listening. Both of these CVEs hit CISA's known exploited vulnerabilities catalog.
The KEV list.
Right, the KEV list. On May 20th, 2026, the federal patching due date is June 3. CISA does not add theoretical academic bugs to the KE list. The KEV is reserved for vulnerabilities that are actively being weaponized against networks in the wild right now.
Yeah, the speed of that listing from discovery to mandate tells you everything you need to know about the threat landscape. This isn't a proof of concept in a lab. This is a highly active, highly successful attack chain that is currently compromising enterprise environments.
So understanding that smoke bomb mechanism naturally leads us to a deeper, honestly more structural question. Why is Defender built in a way that allows its own thoroughness to be weaponized against it? It reminds me of corporate mailroom. Well, imagine a mailroom inspector who is tasked with finding dangerous packages. They find a suspicious, unmarked envelope. But instead of taking it into an isolated, reinforced vacuum chamber, they decide to just rip it open, dump the contents on a desk, and examine the white powder right there in the middle of the crowded main office. The thoroughness of the inspection is exactly what exposes everyone to the anthrax.
That is an excellent illustration of what security engineers call the scanner's paradox. To do its job effectively, Defender cannot just look at the outside of a file. The days of simple malware signatures are long gone.
Right, you can't just check the name and move on.
No, because modern threats are polymorphic. They hide inside other files. So Defender has to unpack complex ZIP archives. It has to render embedded objects and documents. It has to parse incredibly complex, often ancient file formats. It even has to execute suspicious code inside tiny emulated environments just to watch its behavior.
And every single time it rips open one of those suspicious packages, it's doing so while wearing its system-level badge.
Exactly. Inspecting untrusted, potentially malicious content in a highly privileged context is what creates the vulnerability. The deeper Defender inspects to keep you safe, the more attack surface it exposes to the attacker.
It's a catch-22.
It really is. The very feature that makes the scanner effective is what makes it vulnerable to a cleverly crafted trap.
Because of that architecture, the way attackers maintain their grip on a system is totally changing. This was actually the most mind-bending detail in the sources for me. Usually when malware gets on a computer, it has to fight to establish persistence.
Right. It wants to stay there after a reboot.
Exactly. It has to hide a registry key, or it creates a sneaky scheduled task so that when you reboot your computer, the malware starts up again before the antivirus can catch it. But with these exploits, attackers aren't doing that at all.
They don't need to fight the security product to establish persistence because they are literally turning the security product into their persistence mechanism.
Yeah, here's how they actually do it. Defender relies on various DLLs, dynamic link libraries, which are basically instruction manuals that tell the software how to run its scans.
Sure.
Because the attacker now has system privileges, they don't hide their code in some dark corner of the hard drive. They drop their malicious instruction manual right into Defender's core operational folder. When you reboot your computer, Windows starts up, and Defender loads at the system level.
And it grabs everything in that folder.
It looks in its folder, grabs all the instruction manuals, and loads the attacker's code automatically.
Every morning the building reboots, the bodyguard puts on the uniform, and the attacker's code gets loaded right alongside it with a VIP pass. You aren't evading the guard anymore. You are wearing the uniform, walking through the front door, and the system is holding it open for you.
Which forces us to ask, if attackers are weaponizing Defender from the inside, what exactly are they exploiting within its code? Defender is a massive, complex piece of software. What is the specific weakness they are targeting to pull off this illusion?
It's pretty wild.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The answer is an actual ghost from the past. The sources call it the MSHTML zombie. Now, you probably remember Microsoft officially killing off Internet Explorer years ago.
RIP.
Right. They announced its death, they held the funeral, we all moved on to modern browsers. Yet its core rendering engine, a piece of code called Trident, which dates all the way back to the Internet Explorer 6 era, is still alive.
Yeah, and for anyone wondering what a rendering engine does, it is the code responsible for taking raw HTML text and turning it into the fonts, images, and layout you actually see on your screen. It is designed to parse incoming web data.
And this ancient parser is buried deep inside Defender, actively processing untrusted documents at the system level in the year 2026.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this should sound incredibly familiar to anyone who caught our previous deep dive on the 18-year-old NGINX bug. We are looking at the catastrophic danger of legacy trust. Legacy trust is the ultimate unexamined vulnerability in modern computing.
Because everyone just assumes some previous developer handled it.
Oh, absolutely.
They leave it in the code base for backward compatibility. They think, well, what if a user needs to scan an ancient compiled help file from 2003? Better leave the old rendering engine in there just in case.
And the flaw here isn't simply that MSHTML has software bugs. I mean, any rendering engine is going to have bugs. The profound architectural failure is that we trusted a deprecated, unmaintained component from 1998 to handle untrusted, highly suspicious files at the highest possible privilege level today.
It's absurd when you think about it.
It is the equivalent of building a bank vault secured by a state-of-the-art quantum biometric scanner, but leaving the back door held shut by a rusty padlock from a century ago simply because nobody wanted to deal with the hassle of taking it off the hinges.
Right. And because that zombie component is running the show, it leads to this terrifying reality that the briefing calls the green checkmark blindfold. I want you to imagine you are sitting at your desk, you open your Windows security dashboard, and you see that reassuring bright green checkmark.
The one that says you're good.
Exactly. It says you're protected. No actions needed. Scans are running normally. But what you don't know is that the attacker has intercepted the telemetry stream between Defender's engine and that dashboard. A compromised Defender is actively marking its own malware as clean.
The software literally suppresses alerts about its own malicious network traffic.
It's lying to you.
You are staring at a dashboard telling you that you are entirely protected, completely unaware that the trust dashboard itself is the attacker.
It is genuinely chilling.
Yeah.
The Bodyguard is using the building's PA system to announce all clear, situation normal, while actively helping the thieves carry servers out the back door.
Yep.
And you, sitting at your desk, have no independent verification. You just trust the green checkmark because you've been trained to.
And this lack of independent verification is a massive issue. We really need to recognize that this MSHTML zombie and the lying dashboard aren't just isolated coding errors by one company. They represent a systemic architectural failure across the entire cybersecurity industry.
Which brings us to the ultimate philosophical debate in the briefing. Who audits the auditors? We constantly add new security tools to our machines to protect us. We install antivirus suites, we add endpoint detection and response agents to monitor behavior, we install data loss prevention trackers.
You step them up.
We do. But every single one of those tools requires system-level access to function, meaning Every tool we add to protect ourselves is actually a new, highly privileged target for attackers to exploit.
This is a fiercely debated topic among security architects, and it's vital to look at both sides impartially. On one hand, you have the camp that argues we have no choice. They point out that security software needs high privileges to detect and stop advanced threats.
That makes sense.
Right, if a piece of state-sponsored malware is running a system, your antivirus absolutely has to run a system to have the authority to kill it. You cannot protect a system from the bottom up. You have to be the most privileged entity on it.
You can't have a bodyguard who isn't allowed to enter the VIP room where the threat actually is. They need the master key.
That is the traditional view. But on the other hand, you have a growing camp arguing that we are completely ignoring modern sandboxing and isolation technologies.
I like what?
Well, they argue that we've accepted this risky God mode architecture for 30 years simply because it was the only option we had in the 1990s. But today, the landscape has changed. We have technologies like micro-virtualization,
Which is essentially putting the scanning process inside a temporary invisible digital bubble, right? The scanner opens the suspicious file inside this bubble, and even if it's malware and explodes, it only destroys the bubble, which is immediately deleted anyway.
Yeah.
It never touches the real operating system.
And we also have restricted tokens, which allow you to give a scanner temporary permission to read a file, but completely strip away its ability to write changes or execute code.
So it can look, but not touch.
Right. The technology exists to isolate security scanning from the host operating system. Their argument is that by continuing to run decades-old code, like MSHTML, at the system level, without these modern isolations, the industry has gotten completely complacent.
So they're taking the easy way out.
Yeah, by insisting on absolute access, our security tools are actually expanding our attack surface faster than they are shrinking it.
So what does this all mean? If you look at the historical pattern from our previous deep dives, the trend is undeniable. In episode 04, we looked at the Windows DNS client vulnerability.
Yep.
In episode 07, we looked at BitLocker's encryption bypass. In episode 08, we covered that massive NGINX reverse proxy bug. And now, Microsoft Defender. The grand pattern here is clear. The component you trust the most is the component an attacker wants the most. Trust equals access, and access is exactly the currency attackers deal in.
And this means we have to change our operational behavior immediately. For you listening, there's a very specific action plan you need to follow based on these active 0 days.
Let's hear it.
First, do not blindly trust the user interface that says you're up to date. As we established with the green checkmark blindfold, the dashboard might be completely compromised.
So how do you check?
You need to dive into the security settings and verify the actual underlying build numbers. We have dropped the exact version numbers you need to look for, both for the scanning engine and the anti-malware platform, into the show notes for this deep dive. Don't rely on the green shield. Check the math.
Go to the show notes, match the numbers. What is step 2?
Step 2 is prioritization. You need to prioritize patching the machines where Defender is actively running and exposed to untrusted content.
As opposed to what?
Well, a lot of enterprise vulnerability scanners will flag servers where Defender is intentionally disabled, but the core binary files are still sitting on the hard drive somewhere. Those are generally false positives in this specific context. The real immediate danger lies in the endpoints where Defender is turned on and actively scanning incoming files and currently unpatched. Those are the highly exploitable targets.
Because the scanner is the vulnerability. If the scanner is turned off, the mailroom inspector never opens the envelope in the lobby in the first place.
Right.
The bomb doesn't get triggered.
Exactly the dynamic at play. And third, on a broader strategic level, you need to start asking hard questions about your entire detection infrastructure. Every time you evaluate a new security tool or endpoint agent, you have to ask yourself, is this tool expanding our attack surface faster than it is shrinking it?
Are we adding protection, or are we just adding a new avenue for system-level exploitation?
Right.
Because every new integration, every new scanning feature, every legacy compatibility shim left in the code, it isn't just a feature. It is attack surface wearing a badge.
It is all just another master key you are handing out, hoping the person holding it never gets compromised.
To wrap up our journey today, we started by looking at 2 specific, highly urgent 0-day exploits currently weaponizing Microsoft Defender via junction links and legacy rendering engines. But really, we've uncovered the fundamental paradox of modern cybersecurity.
We really have.
We rely on this absolute, unquestioned trust to keep our networks and our endpoints safe. We give our security tools the power to do whatever they want. But that very trust, is the exact vehicle attackers are using to compromise us. The Bodyguard's master key is the very thing that gets the building robbed.
And this raises an important question. We constantly talk about implementing zero-trust networks in our corporate environments. We verify every login, we authenticate every single device, we segment every network so lateral movement is nearly impossible.
Right, trust nobody.
But yet, when it comes to our endpoint security software, we abandon that philosophy entirely and grant it absolute blind trust. If every layer of defense we add just becomes a new, highly privileged weapon for attackers to wield against us, is there a point where the most secure system is actually the one with the least security software installed? How do you ever truly secure a house when the locks themselves are the back door?
Thank you for listening to Zero Day Brief.